right. Welcome, everyone. Happy Thursday. Thank you guys so much for joining. My name is Chris Wickett, and I am part of this awesome group of the Minnesota Agile community. And as you guys know, we've got a wonderful speaker today. I've had the pleasure of working with Creg, and one of our favorite topics on behalf of product innovation. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We will be taking the month of July off so everyone can enjoy their summer holiday and so on. And starting back in August, we will be doing something around strength finders, definitely leading with strength finders, teams, and so on. But for those who are familiar with Discover Your Strengths, Strength Finders from Gallup, that will be our next session. So it will be exciting and really modern ways of looking at the team dynamics and so on. And as part of the Agile community, our mission is always welcoming practitioners from every level, every background. We take a look at the different frameworks and so on, but it's really all about the mindset and what does it take to move into that next evolution of things. And so we've been doing a lot of different soft skills and some Agile things. And now, like I say, introducing Creg Schumann, and his bio says a lot. And like I say, having the privilege to work with him, he's been in this space for a long time now with Turnberry. I can never say that, enterprise principal Turnberry. Is that correct, Creg?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, and he again has been a leading person in the Agile space, working at many different companies in different roles, but especially now we're excited to talk about product innovation. This has been a big deal going on and really helping to perpetuate that innovative spirit into the companies that we're working with. And with that, any other questions or comments from our board? We've got Cheryl Neeser, Cheryl Anderson. We've got Marilyn Lang, Julie Rue. Creg is part of our board also. And Angie Owens also. We've got a great group that we work with. So please don't be shy. Also, if you think of ideas that you'd like to hear from us, we are open to any of the different topics. So we'd love to get your feedback, and you can put some comments in the ideas in the comments, or you can hit us on our LinkedIn, whatever works for you, even in our meetup. Don't be shy on any ideas. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Creg again, the enterprise principal at Turnberry, and definitely one who is all about organizational change, bringing disruptors into organizations such as innovation. So take it on, Creg. Thanks so much again for doing this.
Indeed. So yeah, as Chris was saying, the innovation space has always been fun for me. As a little kid growing up on a farm, you got to play with all sorts of things, right? I learned how to do, arc welding, back when I was maybe 6 years old or something, right? And the fun things that you could just create. So I think that's maybe where I'll blame my parents for that innovative, sort of streak and always experimenting with something. So there you go. There's a piece. I work with Turnberry. We're in a few different places, which is lovely. So let's talk about innovation. It's one of the things that I've been doing for some time, and over the last few years, pretty much that's all I do, which has been a lot of fun. And so, what the heck is innovation, right? And if I take a look at it, it's not invention. Right, there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, we need to have that innovative idea." Hold it. That's called invention, right? When something comes to you while you're in the shower or whatever, that's an invention, right? It's like, oh gosh, this has never been done before, and I just thought of it. It's really cool, and let's try to build this thing, right? Whereas innovation, it's basically really taking a novelty or introducing something new about something you already have, right? Or a blank space, right? And so oftentimes I'm actually inserting myself into that blank space, right? Of where we aren't doing anything there, right? And so we'll talk about how we insert ourselves into a blank space, understanding what that blank space is and the services that we're already providing. When I look at this, where might innovation really happen, right? And so this I've always loved. This took it out of the professional product owner book from Don McGrew and granted, I also got to work along with Chris and with Don and so forth. So I always look at this as like, this is where some innovation can happen, right? If I take a look at that vision, value, validation, right? Of like, what is the vision of my product, right? I may find some places in there where I can do some experiments, right? And there's many different ways to do experiments. But what I maybe want to do in the innovation cycle is really take a look at I look at what my product does or does not do, right? And if I'm looking at that blank space, approach at things, what does it not do? What could we do, right? And therefore, I might look back at my business model itself to say, okay, my business model offers value propositions to certain customer segments, etc., right? What's it not doing? What could it do, right? What is that art of the possible? And so that's usually one way or one entry point into the world of innovation. There's many others, right? I want to do things differently in a more novel, unique way. A lot of people talk about, the digital transformation. It's like, well, it was manual and now we're doing this digital. I mean, granted, we've been doing that since, I don't know, a long time, the 50s, give or take, right? We just decided to call it a digital innovation. I still remember getting my first digital calculator back in the 70s. So I guess we've been transforming a while. And so I love us technology folks. And so you may want to look at the way we're doing things or how we're addressing a problem. We may want to address it differently, right? And so you could even think of the more traditional process improvement sorts of things as an ability to do some innovation. You may want to take a look at, the various different ways that we're going through and doing things. I remember Chris oftentimes telling, stories of, it was called a separated bag or something like that, from the airlines. And so it's like, just call it a lost bag. You lost my luggage, come on, right? But, looking at how can we do that better or differently. And so many organizations will go off and try that. And that can be in an innovative space. Innovation for me is also a mindset, right? Wanting to do things that create a different level of value. And I think that's the other really thing, to really realize here is, when we look at this diagram in front of us, what's our vision, right? And let's see here, can I admit that? Here we go. If my vision starts to change, right, and become more or become less, wonderful, right? But then what is the value, right? If I'm trying to be innovative, by golly, it better be delivering me some additional value, a better form of value, support a value that I'm already getting, but in a much more cool way. And then I should be able to validate this stuff as well, right? I can't just say, wow, it's new, therefore it's valuable. No, new is not valuable, right? Sometimes new can really suck. And so, is that really innovative to get something that now sucks? Likely not. So I need to validate, what I'm putting out there, right? And so we'll talk about some tools and things that I've been using for that validation. Because early validation, everyone always says fail fast. It's like, well, sure, but what does that really mean, right? And so I want to go and bring some examples for you. Alrighty, next slide. As I kind of take that little diagram before and change it a little bit, let's see here. Okay. Oh, wrong way. Too many windows. I take, the little concentric circle piece, put it out flat. It looks like a column of some sort. But what I can say is that I got this organizational strategy and vision, right? And usually organizations have an innovation arm, right? And so I've been able to work with a number of different innovation groups within Optum and other places. And their role is to really try find those interesting spaces in heart disease or other things, right? And what's the business model of going after and addressing heart disease? It makes sense. Is that a sound business choice? Who are the customers that are interested in it? So a lot of these things make a lot of sense. And where do we do some of this innovation? Or granted, we're changing the rules, right, with our business model, our vision. We're going to change the rules around what goals we may have and initiatives to try and do some that innovation. But we can reflect this in a number of the different tools. So around, that center diagram are some examples of tools, right? If I want a business model, I could use the business model canvas. I could use a lean canvas. I could use an opportunity canvas. I could use a platform canvas. I could keep talking about the different ways you could do a business model. Heck, I could go to the Small Business Association and download their template for a business model that you can apply for a loan for, and so forth. The important part is, what is my business model? Is this a good business to be in? How do I test those things? How do I have a vision? How do I understand my people, my personas? And so those are a lot of the things that I've been using to really understand how do we serve customers that we may already be serving, but in a different way, right? So looking at a persona with empathy, right? This particular canvas for personas, it's very small for you guys most likely, but it comes from Rebel, and we'll dive into some more templates and dive into some actual mural boards that we've been using with Optum Behavioral Health and Optum Virtual Care, MedExpress, and that combo. The next piece down there is some sort of a job to be done canvas. Fun. Story mapping. And I don't have a mouse anymore. That's lovely. Let's see if it works. Design sprints and so forth. There we go. So when we dive into more of a business model canvas, I just put this in a slide, but we'll go into some of the real stuff here as we go into the case study itself. But you'll notice, like, in that tiny little bottom center, that's what you may recognize as the business model canvas from Strategizer. But when you're looking at how do I really do this, you really need to kind of go and say, yeah, no, I need to facilitate this stuff, right? I just don't throw up, a few boxes in a canvas and say, let's go fill it out, right? So there's different ways. So up on the top right, how do you really figure out your customer's segmentation? All right, I use the customer-centric method, basically the rings from Luke Holman, and use that sort of an exercise with people. So there's different ways that you can facilitate these things. So you want to make sure that you're getting something that you can facilitate yourself. The other thing that I do a lot of is time boxing and a lot of liberating structures when doing these sorts of things, because it does remove power from the room, and I can't say enough good things about all the various liberating structures that I've used over time and chained together to get some results. Personas. Oftentimes, working for a consulting company, right, we come to an organization, say like Optum Behavioral Health, and they have some personas for us. Now, not to speak bad of any of our clients, they have done what they need to do for personas. However, oftentimes their personas lack empathy. I was going to say a lot of empathy, or any empathy, or oftentimes their personas are from a marketing perspective, or they're from a cost perspective, meaning this type of patient costs us this much PMPM per member per month, right? And we can understand utilization, either higher utilizers and so forth. Now, while that gives me information about, say, Emma here, I really don't understand how Emma is thinking and feeling, what Emma is hearing, what she's seeing, right? What she says and does, the pains and gains around a particular area, right? Maybe that blank space area, sort of a thing. So getting into empathy helps immensely, especially the pains and gains. Once I understand the hearing, the saying and doing and so forth, I can come up with some good pains and gains. And then what I can kind of do is like, okay, what are my jobs to be done? What would Emma hire us to do, right? In the behavioral health case study that I'm going to show you in a bit, we went after low acuity people in behavioral health. So that's people that are first raising their hand, right? That are saying, I catch myself, in the bathtub just shivering, or I find myself not wanting to do my hobbies or anything else anymore, right? Anxiety, depression, or my boss told me I smell like vodka for the 5th day in a row. Yeah, I might need some help. All right, and so when they're in that low acuity and they're first kind of figuring that out, well, what do they want us to help them with, right? So, well, guess what? If any of you have been in that spot, you may have went, okay, well, society tells me I need a therapist. All of the movies tell me I need a therapist. Everyone else tells me I need a therapist, right? All my friends, whoever I confide in, I need a therapist. So what do? Well, you go figure out how to get a therapist. Maybe you'll go to your health plan. You'll look at the provider directory. Lovely. You got a provider directory now. And it gives you a list of people. And then you realize that your wait for a first appointment is 3 to 6 months for a therapist. If you want a psychiatrist who can prescribe you, various different drugs and so forth, it's maybe 3 to 6 to 9 months of a wait. That's a long time. And so that's the spot where we wanted to play because we need more help, right? And so this is where these sorts of things come in these different ideas, easier way to obtain EHS authorization and so forth, right? So these are from different personas, Emma being somebody that is helping that person who's raising their hand for the first time, getting empathy for a job itself, right? We have empathy for Emma, right? Wonderful, right? But how do we have, this is my appointed time, right? Schedule an appointment. So how do I understand what's happening before the situation and life cycle of that job? How do I know when that job has failed? And the red card's here. How do I know get back to green? What are my resolutions to fix this job that went awry, right? How do I understand the customer? What is their motivation to do this job in the first place, right? What are their barriers? What are the gains? This is a really cool space that you can really get into, the actual human-centered design side of innovation. In all of this, what you're trying to do is figure out the opportunities of innovation that you can go and play with some things, right? How can I rescue them? How can I bypass some really crazy stuff we're doing to them already, right? How can I create some individualization that's just not there, right? And how do I support them for longevity? Those things are much more interesting, right? I can then take that job to be done on Canvas. Maybe I combine a few of them together. The really interesting thing right now, I'm working with an organization called LifeSpark. They deal with elder care. And we did a number of jobs to be done, identified, and they're really high priority, right? And then we started with one job to be done on Canvas, and we started to do, a story map. And by golly, we story mapped, in the end, 4 different job to be done canvases in one story mapping session, just because it felt right. Is that bad? No, not really. So story maps are a wonderful thing. If you haven't gotten into story mapping, it's just pretty darn simple. Go ahead and read Jeff Patton's book around story mapping. Um, every once in a while I get to chat with him, and he's like, yeah, the book's too long. He goes, it's really simpler than that. I go, I know. It's fine. So don't let his book itself scare you off. It's really good. One of the things that I do that I think is a little more unique is this purple stuff down here, right? Solution opportunities, right? When I'm doing all of these sessions, right, and these identifying the jobs to be done, when I'm doing the job to be done canvas, what I'm doing is the right people need to be in the room. For the right people to be in the room, I need some experts, and I need some people that just really don't know what the heck they're doing, right? I need actual users, right, that are wanting to use a product that doesn't exist, right? They have some certain desires and so forth. I often use a tool called D-Scout to go and recruit strangers on the street, if you will, that meet some demographics, right? That identify, as having some earlier, anxiety or some low-grade sort of depression and that sort of thing. And that way I can recruit them not only to drop them into these conversations around a story map, right? When we're talking about a person like them or they themselves, they are wonderful people to help you discover some things, right? In doing that, it was really interesting because we had a number of people that were, they didn't work for Optum, and so forth. So what are we going to do? We had them in, and they were using language, from, they were a little younger people, and they were using language that our, content person, James, he was like, they're talking about mental health and substance use in a very different way than we do. And we had some conversations, outside of having everyone else around, and he goes, this is content gold. We have been using the wrong language for how long, right? We are so clinical. No wonder people don't understand this, right? It's like, yeah, so getting the right people in the space, I think, is the very important part for innovation as well. It's not
Craig,
necessarily about the tools.
can I
Oh,
interrupt you 1 second? Can
yeah,
you clarify what the name of the tool was that you mentioned? Was it Deep Scout?
just the letter D and Scout,
Okay.
like Boy Scout.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And if you're ever interested, you can go and register to be a participant on DScout, and participate in different studies. You can go out and go shopping, and you can tell them, yeah, I went and shopped for this thing, and here was my success or failure. They have all sorts of different things that you can do, which is pretty cool. Yes, you're paying these people; they don't show up for free, and so and DScout handles the payment to these folks, and just charges you, and a fee and all that jazz. So, but for volunteering, well, you're not really volunteering. You're sometimes it's completely voluntary. It depends on the organization that wants data. So, alrighty. When I come back in here in the story mapping, right, I may circle areas and go, this looks really interesting. Let's play with that idea. But I don't want to invest a lot. I don't need to start building something, right? And so some of the ideas that we had were, things like creating an emotional support line. It has nothing to do with technology, right? It has everything to do with staffing and the right skills and so forth, and figuring out how we do that. What kind of problems or things will we do? How will we market that? So don't, mistake that, innovation only happens in the digital or technology world. It can happen in all sorts of spaces. In this particular example, I'll go into it in more detail. This was our first design sprint, and we were really talking about, hey, let's have some sort of a digital thing, right? Because if we have an emotional support line and have a mental health line that helps them prepare for their first visit to a therapist, those were two new innovative pieces that we came out with just in the story mapping and pieces. Let's go do that, and we really didn't have to do too much in the design sprint stuff for that stuff. But what we did identify as some sort of digital guided experience would be useful, especially for Gen Z millennial sorts of folks. That seemed to resonate best with them. They didn't want to call anybody and talk. They just wanted a digital way to go and figure out, maybe do some self-diagnosis that wasn't WebMD, or Google, Dr. Google, And so this was the first design sprint we wanted to do, and it was like, well, when I come to that digital experience, what do I see? When I first show up in the front door of this digital experience, what do I see? So that was our first design sprint, and I'll bring you through some of the pieces around it. What the heck does a design sprint look like? So let's pop into a little more around. I've already talked a lot about, so I may pop through a bit of these screens a little faster. But from the challenge, right, was creating that space, that there was only a provider directory, right? How else and what else can I get people that will help them in that time they're waiting for a therapist? Also, do they even need a therapist, right? There may be some things that they can just do themselves and they'll be fine, right? So we have to understand what is, right, on the bottom left there. That's how are we dealing with it today, right? And most of the times, we already know what it is, right? But we want to get clear on exactly what it's doing, how it's doing it, so that we can get to the next step of what could be, right? And that's that story mapping and things, the jobs to be done stuff. What could we do? But then you enter the design sprint world, right, of what wows, right? That's where you bring in people that are helping you design things that are actually going to be users of this thing, which is really cool. And at the end, it's designed by people that would use this product, and then it's validated by people that would actually use this product, which is really cool. And that helps us understand what actually works. That's backed up by a business model canvas, and so forth. Alrighty. So, low acuity. What is our vision there, right? So 1 in 4 adults, experience mental illness in a given year. 60% of Americans with behavioral health needs are not getting proper care. You have 200 billion in lost earnings in the U.S. alone for untreated mental health conditions. Yeah, that often comes into the idea of time out, right? Short term leave and so forth. Um, you know, OBH wanted to grow their members by 39 million people. About 60 some people drop any therapy or other care after 3 visits. Um, so yeah, why does that happen? Why are they not feeling supported? Um, and so we went and played with a lot of those things. Some challenges and pain points that we found was really the fractured experience of seeking care for behavioral health issues. The competition out there with the digital space. If you've got an iPhone, you've got most likely get access to all sorts of, Calm and all these little apps that hope and pray and want to deliver some things. So that's the competition we have to deal with in that digital guided experience. There's this nice little product that we found called Wobot, WOEBOT. It's actually artificial intelligence therapist, which actually silly does a pretty darn good job. As we tested it out with some people, the trust, right? That you're actually gonna keep my information private, so that yes, I've decided that bourbon is the best thing ever, and I start at 6 a.m. Right, and that's maybe some sensitive data, right? Continuity to of now to then for the member, right? How do I move across? Key strategies, differentiating the digital experience. Why is that going to be more interesting? Is it very engaging to our members and so forth? So these were our guiding principles inside of these design sprints. Results, I mean, our poor Mark was one of our low acuity personas, right? I mean, Google WebMD, Psychology Today, phone calls scheduling. No, I'm not seeing new clients. Oh God, how much will this cost me? I don't know. Oh gosh, now we gotta wait, right? To the future state where, yeah, let's simplify that, from now, instead of at least more than 3 weeks, now to 3 weeks where I can actually do something. When you look at member centricity, focus, simplicity, and clarity. So these really also guided us in our design sprints. The art of the possible, Chris's journey. Um, you know, this is what we started to put together as the story, right? We would have these different design sprints and really build this journey, right, for Chris. And we go from engage to understand and recognize, what you're dealing with, personalize and guide so that it's actually Chris's plan, not just some cookie cutter sort of a thing. Support and maintain to recovery. Um, what we really came to understand from the design sprints and having the people we had in there is we needed to build trust right away from when you log in, right? To this digital experience. Right? It's like, welcome, Chris. This tool is a quick way, and the information you give is confidential and will not be shared, right? And it's coming from Maria, an actual psychiatrist. And it's like, okay, I feel, when we had different, people, or when we didn't even have a person or a quote from Maria, and we just said the stuff, no person, picture, or whatever, that didn't play so well, right? When we all of a sudden added a picture and a psychiatrist, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, that makes me feel cool, right? And so it's really important in that innovation space to say what is going to work, right? We're welcoming them in the door. How do we not chase them away? And then as we pop into more, right, we can actually ask them some questions, right? And so we actually, is anyone familiar with the PHQ-2, PHQ-6, the GAD-4, and so forth? Those are the little questions that you get most likely when you visit your regular, primary care physician. It's like, do you have any loss of interest in, your hobbies or things like that? Those are little questions that we can ask. Well, what we ended up doing was testing, can we do the 2 questions? Can we do the 4 questions? Can we do the 6 questions? And everyone was like, oh, we can't ask too many questions. They'll get bored. They'll leave. What we found out by trying it out is they liked the more questions because they thought they were getting a better tailored experience, that we got to know more about them, and their plan and the information provided would be more trustworthy. And it's like, wow, okay, cool. Um, as we go through and find different ways of how do you actually get somebody to actually look at, their options, from a clinician to a psychologist to a psychiatrist, what works for you, from a cost, from, a wait time and everything else. And then exploring therapy, right? Thinking about your goals and helping you prepare, for therapy itself. Then adding other channels, right? With things of like, hey, you most likely said, yeah, I don't know about this, right? And I was like, hey, we found 3 additional therapists that are available for appointments for this week, sort of thing. This is the larger, sort of prototype that we ended up with in that journey. And with that, I'm going to escape from here. Oh, no, that's the right one. Anyone need to do a concert? Here, I'm going to go pop into the design sprint board for this behavioral health stuff. It's a big board. It takes a while to load. There we go. These are the actual screens that would come out of that sort of thing, or examples of them. Case study 2. I have one slide for this. We follow the same thing as OBH. However, our goal was to present a moonshot change, right, at the UHG Investor Conference, right? And our client was the combination of Optum Virtual Care and MedExpress. MedExpress is a collection of 300 urgent care facilities across the U.S. That's owned by Optum itself. Of course, Optum Virtual Care is all about telemedicine sort of stuff. Well, the problem is the telemedicine person can't take your blood, right? It's a little tough. And so how do we merge this world, right? And we had a bunch of thought leaders, in the space telling us that whoever figures out virtual, physical, and the combination of it and makes it flawless is going to win, right? And the interesting part about this is what we were doing was like responding to Amazon. Amazon out of the blue enters the healthcare market, right? And enters it digitally, right? Enters it physically, digitally together, right? They had hired, Christine, and she just came in and did some really cool stuff. So what did United Healthcare decide to do? Ask her what her number was. They hired her. So I got to work with Christine, right? And so, hey, why not? We also thought, well, this has to be a moonshot thing. So, Creg and his team, we're not so creative, we're not so fancy, right? We're not graphic designers, we're not, those sorts of folks. So we ended up hiring a firm called fantasy.co. They have done user interface and design for things like everything you will use tonight, Netflix, Tesla, the list goes on. And so I have a small video. It's just a plain old Loom video. So one of the points of experimentation, there's many ways to do experiments, right? The Wizard of Oz sorts of things. One of them is an explainer video, right? And Fantasy does a great job at putting together explainer videos. So they would take a lot of the stuff that we were producing from our story maps, from our design sprints and so on and so forth, and make them look beautiful, right? And so it's a moonshot, UHG Investor Conference, to go and actually change the way healthcare is done. And so let me go find the video. There we go. Hopefully that give you some idea of the different things that we came up with. Things. Remember the Nate guy that's great with questions. He was also on this endeavor, and he was very passionate about a lot of these things, right? Hockey coach and so forth, has little kids, and so he was like, one of our ideas was, if you come in, right, and you pop into your exam room using your phone, just like you were at a Hilton or a Marriott, right? It just opens your exam room for you. There's no more waiting room, right? So that was the other idea, and one of the other ideas is like, okay, once you get to your exam room, if there isn't somebody to do your vitals, why don't you do them yourself, right? Okay, cool. So there's these Taito cart sorts of things, and so we thought, okay, let's put all that. So poor Nate was actually ordering all of these Taito devices and the cart and things and hooking it up to some technology and so forth to kind of show how it might work, right? He lives in the Grand Forks area, so then he'd come down to Minneapolis and we'd play with all this stuff, and all during a pandemic, quite fun. So lots of really cool things, in that innovation space. And that innovation space is trying to really, put a face to that art of the possible for me. The last many years I've been doing this innovation stuff. It's definitely kind of been more than rewarding. It's a little different than, coming in and going, okay, yes, I'm going to create a new loan processing system. That's a little boring, right? The healthcare space has been really cool in the innovation side of things. So, any questions? I don't know if we can do the mutes or not, or in the chat box. There we go.
Yeah, Craig, really cool. Again, going back to your passion on that design. I like the definition of the difference of innovation compared to, gosh, now I forgot the first part that you started out with. Sorry. And when you're doing your design sprints, how long did they take, if you will, just generally speaking?
Oh, the design sprints, 1 week.
1 week.
So
That's what I
Monday
thought.
to
That
Friday.
whole thing
Yep.
was 1 week kind of thing.
Yep.
Great. Invention. Thank you, Jason. Yes, it is different. And I think that mindset might help folks to see you're not inventing something new. You're trying to be innovative of their business model already, which is
Right.
exactly how that video came across.
Yep.
Really
Yeah.
nice.
Taking things that you already have, using them differently, combining things, right? And yeah, I mean, some of these devices, right? So there's the Taito cards, right? There's also another product out there that I use a lot in my house with Y things, WITHING, blood pressure, scale, etc. Everything just goes right into my little Apple Health thing, and it's just like, okay, there you go, which is quite handy. So, just how can you do things a little differently?
How did you get leadership kind of on board with that?
Ah, that's the fun part. I think, our team is oftentimes very different, right? We approach things more from, we're not the experts, and in fact, we barely know a darn thing, right? We barely know how to tie our shoes. And I think that is the different part where, there, there were a few other firms that had, large firms that had brought, innovation, right? So they may have, big four sorts of names and so forth. And medical director there had dismissed each of them, right? And first 3 days with MedExpress slash Fantasy slash OVC, all of a sudden, the MedExpress medical director said, in 3 days, you guys have provided more innovation than all 6 prior firms, by just asking really good questions, right? We didn't have anything fancy, right? We had Mural, right? And as we facilitated things, Nate would message me and goes, I think we screwed up. That's not going to be our next step. We got to do something else. It's like, all right, we're going to break, all right? And we're reorganizing Mural and whatnot. I think it's that humbleness, that humility, like, yeah, we're not all that great, right? I mean, but we do know how to read a room, right? We do know how to adapt, right? And our facilitation methods to even the exercises or the things that we're going to do. And I think that's the key part of having that humility with that innovation, because you don't know what you're doing, right? You don't know where you're going at all, right? We've got, Scrum as an empirical, process, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, inspect adapt, right? And that's where you know little about what you're doing, right? there's in innovation, you oftentimes know nothing about what
Yeah.
you're doing, right? And so it's like, okay, so with that, right, you take that time box, that sprint time box down, right, to a design sprint, right, of 1 week. Even with our 1 week, pieces, we would take all story maps in 1 week. We would take all persona work in 1 week, right? We would take our interviews and so forth that really understands the what is in 1 week, right? Everything was always in 1 week because after that we went, do we need more interviews? Yes or no, right? And so forth. So I think that was some of the key differences, from what we had done to other people. And it requires people that are very facilitative in nature, right? To really push this along and to help people come along. You talked about leadership. How do we get leadership involved, right? When you come in with a plan like that, they're not very comfortable, right? It's like, well, we'll just figure it out. It's a tough sell, right? The nice thing is that I've been hopping from group to group within Optum and healthcare and now outside of it because they've heard of this work, and they're like, okay, we understand that there's really no plan. There's just a notion, right? A direction, right?
Yeah.
And that means that with our leadership, we have to have that regular check-in at least once a week, right? We have our own little retrospective with that leadership group that is funding, this initiative that's, bringing people like, behavioral health, right? USRA, or, medical directors. I mean, their time could be spent elsewhere, right? And so one, they're expensive not from a dollar perspective, but what else could they be doing, right? And so you have to judge that, and so it's like, yeah, USRA, we want to talk with you every week on a status call, if you will, right? More of a retrospective of how are we doing, how do we have to adjust things, what are you hearing from other people? And I think that's the only way you're going to be able to do that, and you have to set them up with that expectation. It's like, here's our idea, here's our journey, it's what we've done before, however, we may need to change that, and you're going to be involved in changing that.
Yeah, cool.
Just in case anyone didn't see the chat, everyone is able to unmute now. If you have any questions, you can certainly ask them directly.
So if someone wants to go, please interrupt me. But I was going to say, with your expertise in how you come at things, any words of wisdom for us, Craig, as we start our adventure into more of innovation with, I know.
Yeah, I mean, we're still kind of in a virtual world, right? And quite truthfully, would I want to do this in person? I don't think so. You know, there are advantages, absolutely, but with the behavioral health stuff, I'm happy we didn't. The people that joined us never had their video camera on, and we said that that's okay, right? They wanted to be more anonymous, right? We had a first name, that was it. Whether that was their first name or not, don't know. In that case, privacy was a benefit, and not being in person was a benefit. The other side of it is our artifacts are our working process, right? If I was in person, I'd have Sharpies and Post-its, right? And now I have to hire somebody to like translate that into digital copy of somehow or sort, or pictures, right? And that's just a lot, right? The lovely thing is those mural boards are sitting out there, and so anyone can go back into them and go, what were we thinking? Here's our thought process. It's all laid out. So that is a large advantage, I think. So I continue to do, even though like with LifeSpark, doing very similar things, and we are in person more. Some of us are, some of us are not. Some of us live in California, right, and so forth. So it's a mixed mode of, are you actually together? So we'd have a room here together, a room there together, and then sprinkled other just individuals. But we're all using, a very similar whiteboard tool called Miro, M-I-R-O. So it seems like those two are becoming the leaders in this space. So for whiteboarding and sticky notes and design.
Greg, it looks like we have a question from Maru. Sorry if I butchered your name. Feel free to unmute.
Perfect, Chris. Perfect. I don't know if this is. I actually didn't have a question at the beginning, but I do have one. It's not directly related to what you've shown us. I'm not from the field. I have nothing to. But if you were to work on not a product like you've showed us in the mural or on a video, but if you were to work on a strategy, my question is really open. You can interpret it the way you want. I'd be grateful for any information. How would you do it, or how would you think that would unfold?
Yeah, well, I think, with starting with a business model canvas, that does include, I would say quite a bit of strategy. As you identify the value propositions that you hope to deliver, you identify your customer segments, right, of what you want to serve and order them, right? Who are our first customers that we want to work with, right? Which are the value propositions we want to go after first, right? So that forms the basis of your strategy, along with, how do I, get and retain, customers? How do I actually deal with the relationship with them on communication and other. I also identify key partners and where am I going to do the work myself, where am I not going to do the work myself, right? So the ever famous thing with Nespresso, it's like, what does Nespresso themselves do? Absolutely nothing, right? They don't make the flavors, that's farmed out. They don't make the machines, that's farmed out. They don't make anything, right? They don't even own their own stores or pay their own employees because they're not their employees, right? They're the store's employees. So what does Nespresso do? They have everything in all their key partnerships, and that's their strategy. So I think that's where it kind of really starts here. But don't make a mistake that you're going to have a wonderful strategy right up front and then go and do an innovation. You come up with an idea of a business model, right, and using something like a business model canvas, start the innovation and go, how right or wrong are we? Chris asks for advice. Strategizer is where I go for a lot of things with the business model canvas, the value proposition canvas, and so forth. But what they have is testing business ideas. It's a wonderful book out there. Do read that. It's well worth your time. Don't get the Audible version. There's wonderful pictures in there that are priceless. So take that. They also have another book called The Invincible Company. And if you want to go to Strategizer, where do we go? Right over here. Right. Boom. Hopefully I'm still sharing. Yes, I am. Cool. And so, yeah, as you come on down here, there we go. Okay, I'm just going to recommend all of these books just because I have all of them. But, the Testing Business Ideas is really cool, right? As well as The Invincible Company. And that really helps you with that converting strategy into ideas. For me, the value proposition canvas is one of the coolest things because it takes your business model, takes one value proposition, takes one customer segment, pairs them together, and says, alrighty, how do I actually know that my hopeful thing, maybe it's a service design, a product design, a combination of those things, physical product, right? And what does that customer actually need? What are their pains and gains? And is there a fit? And so that's the basis between the value proposition, design and the testing the business idea.
Greg, Maru had typed some more into the chat and said that he doesn't think the BMC produces any useful strategy. He's been working in strategy for 15 years, and the question was targeted at your approach for working with clients.
Maru, can you tell me more on the approach for working with clients? He says he cannot unmute.
Thank you. The part that you explained at the end, the questions you got about working with leadership and all those things. So my question was targeted at your approach was, as I understood it, was using design sprints. All right. So and I asked about what if the product was a strategy that means a means to an end, a path to a collection of paths to achieve a set goal or a set target state. The reason I don't want to delve into why I've been teaching the BMC, I don't know, for some time, but I don't want to delve into why I really think that had nothing to do with strategy. It's just, anyways, it's a different discussion. Okay. My question was to learn from you, the stuff you've shown was really awesome. That's the starting of my thinking. And I wanted to know if you were to work on a strategy, iteratively, not knowing where you're going to go, but you need to provide a meaningful path for people to follow afterwards. If you have an idea how you would do it, I got a lot from what you've explained just before, even though I don't agree with the BMC, but I still got a lot. So I already think I already got an answer, just to be fair.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
only if you have something to add.
And I think the strategy around doing this work, it changes each time. And I think I mentioned before around how we facilitated things. It's like, whoa, okay, yep, nope, must change. And so I'm still experimenting with all of this, and I think I will be until past my own retirement. It's you find different ways to work with people a lot. I think the pandemic has shown us a really interesting facet of working together that in some ways is more fruitful. So yeah, I still have a lot more to learn, I would say. Any other questions?
Well, Craig, again, thank you so much for sharing your journey, like you say, constantly experimenting with how to do this and how to bring innovation into companies. We appreciate it very much. And your continued learnings and sharing that is really exciting, and to see that how it works in real life, and to really demystify some of it, if you will. So thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Cool. And Jason had a question there. Let's see here. I'm not findable on LinkedIn. Wow.
Oh,
I'm not?
Yeah, good one. Yes, you need to follow Craig. He has got a lot of great things.
Thank you, Maru. I'm more private than I maybe should be, but I'll have to figure out how to open that up, because usually I just lock everything down. The reason I'm more private about my life is I sat on the board of directors for the Human Rights Campaign, lobbying for LGBTQ civil rights. Needless to say, in that work, I have had a number of death threats over the years. So, so I'm a little tough to find.
All right.
Cool. And then I think, Jason, you had a question of what do you call what you do? I always ask, how do I describe what I do to my mother, right? I grew up on a big old farm in Minnesota, and, when I used to do software development, that's how I got my start in life. I'd say, well, I work with computers. Oh, you can help me with, hardware issue number 1, number 2. I was like, no, actually I can't. And then I moved into this world of project management, and I figured, how do I tell my mom and dad what I do there? And they understood that even less than anything else. So did I. And that's what pushed me into the Agile space pretty darn quickly. And in this Agile space, they still don't get it, right? So I can't describe it that way or things like that. So what I would tell my parents now, what I do is not try to describe my job itself, but the outcomes of my job, right? And I think, when the outcome of the behavioral health thing is when Yusra, all of a sudden, we're at the end and doing our retrospective, and what do we think this thing would do, right? And Yusra, being the very learned person she is, she was, well, I like numbers, right? And she's got so many PhDs, including some in statistics and whatnot. And so she created a model, right? And she goes, I am predicting a significant number of reduction in attempted suicides in the next, our first year of, it's like, now when somebody like you sort of says a significant number, that means there's a gamma rating and all that jazz, right? Which, over 70 million people that are served by Optum Behavioral Health, if that's 1%, yeah, that's interesting for me, right? And I told you, so if it was just one person, I'd be happy, right? 1% of 70 million, that's pretty interesting. So, that's what I usually help my mom and dad understand is what do? I go help companies do valuable things. And I think every Scrum team in the world should be able to say that too, right? Rather than my velocity increased, right? It's like, what's the outcome, right? And I think every Scrum team does produce those sorts of things. They just most likely don't have the transparency to the value they're creating.
Well, thank you again. Yeah, Agile product designer that makes dings in the world, that's for sure. So thank you again, Craig, so much for everything. Thank you guys for joining us today and for your time. We, again, just as a reminder, we are taking July off. To everyone, enjoy your summer, and then we'll kick right back into August, and we'll bring into strength finders, other things, but please let us know any ideas of other topics you would like to see.